Hello, my name is Vicki Molta, and this is You and Your Mental Wellness. Tonight I have a guest on, someone I've known for a long time. Her name is Kathy Flaherty, and she's Executive Director of Connecticut Legal Rights Project, and she's also a person in recovery, and I have a lot of questions to ask you tonight.
Absolutely.
About, first of all, if you could just tell me a little bit about, you just started this position recently as Executive Director, and if you could just explain a little bit about what you do and what the organization does.
Sure. The Connecticut Legal Rights Project, we're a private nonprofit law firm, and we provide legal services to people with serious mental health conditions to protect their legal rights. And it's a combination of work that we do for people who are inpatient at Connecticut state-operated hospitals, and also people who live out in the community to protect their rights to their housing, their education, their employment, and really their treatment and recovery, because people who are getting treated through the DEMA system have certain legal rights under what's called the Patient's Bill of Rights to their recovery in certain ways that their treatment and recovery is supposed to happen. So we make sure that folks have access to the services and supports that they need to function well and contribute to their communities.
So some of the issues that you help them with would be, like you said, for housing maybe, or helping them get on Social Security. Is it things like that? Or
We do some Social Security disability work. That's part of what we do, because having an income does enable people to participate in their communities, but a lot of times it's access to things like safe and stable housing. So if people need reasonable accommodations to either get into housing or perhaps remain in housing, we help them do that. And if people go to work and have experience problems at their work due to their mental illness and are discriminated against because of that, we protect their rights to that, as well as to go to school and pursue their educational goals.
so so is there a large amount of people that come to you to get help? And
Absolutely. The hardest thing about being in legal services is that when we have to say no to people, because we simply don't have the staff and the resources and the capacity to help everybody who needs our assistance in whatever legal matters they have. And the other difficult thing is we don't address every legal issue that somebody living with a mental illness might have. We have to deploy our staff attorneys and our paralegal advocates to the things that are the highest priority for us, which are the things that I've listed. But people have a lot of other issues, whether it might be a family law matter or help with other support programs like food stamps or medical benefits from the state, that we just don't help with because we don't have the ability to do that. But what we do is we refer them to other resources in the community to get the help that they need.
So, having known you a long time, you've been a long time advocate and very involved in Connecticut legal and other areas of just educating people about mental illness and with your recovery. What would you say about Connecticut in general in terms of it being a progressive, open state as compared to other states in the country, and from what you've seen, your own experiences? And
from my personal experience and the experience of my friends, I think one of the things Connecticut has going for it is that it is a system that's what's called a recovery-oriented system. And what a recovery-oriented system means is that it's supposed to be centered on the person in recovery and what they think they need to meet their goals and aspirations. Systems are not set up like that everywhere in the country. I think the other thing is that people in recovery are very active in Connecticut, and we are very much a part of setting the agenda for what the mental health system should be in Connecticut. I'm not sure it's necessarily like that in every other state. You know, there are people, because no matter where you are, there are people who aren't happy with the system as it exists. I'm not happy with the system as it exists, but I think we have more opportunities here in Connecticut to participate in the system. There are very exciting things going on. I know you've had other guests from organizations like Advocacy Unlimited, which are really showing whole different ways that people can recover and heal.
right.
And that just doesn't happen everywhere.
So do you think in recent years there's been an improvement in just maybe bringing out their resources for people who additional resources for people who need help and more awareness and
I think there's definitely a lot of awareness. We have had a lot of different educational and anti-discrimination campaigns here in Connecticut. Even the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services had their Embrace, Don't Disgrace series of social media outreach to let people know that we are here. We are everywhere. I mean, whatever set of statistics you believe, you know, it could be 1 out of 4 of us have some kind of diagnosable condition depending on our age. But the bottom line is we're members of the community. If it's not you, if it's not me, and it's both of us because we are open about our conditions, it's somebody we know, whether it's somebody in our family, somebody in our one of our friendship circles, somebody who we work with.
Right.
The reality is we are in every aspect of society, and we just have to be allowed the opportunity to participate in society. You know, as good as things are here in Connecticut, there are times where I have seen things happen where I've been rather astounded, definitely disappointed, but at some of the attitudes that have been exhibited by other people in Connecticut who just are either in denial or just don't want things around them or don't want to think about them.
are you talking about people who have mental health issues or family members or people who have no knowledge of mental illness at all or
I find it hard to believe that some of the people saying some of the things I have heard them say don't actually know somebody who has a mental illness. I think the more of us who are open about our conditions and talk about our conditions, I think the more aware people will become. But there are times where the conversations I've seen people have are things that they might have said 30, 40, 50 years ago
really?
about people who are part of what are other legally protected classes, whether it's race, whether it's gender, whether it's religion. But I think the lack of tolerance that I've seen and heard and been in rooms and just flat, you know, people would probably like to deny that they ever said something like that.
do they say things like pull yourself up by your bootstraps and
Some of that,
suck it up and
there's some of that, but it's more like I don't want them living on my street. And if they are living on my street, my kids won't be able to walk to school, which is, the reality is we're probably living on your street already anyway.
right right
And your kids are walking by our house anyway, and they're totally fine.
right
And and you wouldn't say that, or at least you shouldn't say that about other groups of people, but people still feel it's okay to say it about us. And I
Right.
just find that incredibly offensive. And it needs to stop.
Yep. So tell me about your recovery a little bit, about your experiences maybe up to the point of your recovery, and because has it always been this way with you? Like when you were first diagnosed, did you always feel that you could be open about it and not, or was it a process for you? I have a lot of questions
Okay.
that I'm throwing at you.
Okay, and it never really occurred to me not to be open about it. Growing up, looking back on what it was like growing up, I was probably having problems with depression and anxiety all through childhood, but never really knew to frame it like that. And nobody ever really dealt with it like that because it was the 70s, and I don't think there was any awareness about conditions in childhood the way people talk about it now. So I just I did really well in school, and when you do really well in school and you're a kid and that's your job, people think that you're okay. It wasn't until I was in college that I really had serious problems with depression and anxiety. And I'm actually a lawyer today because of that. I was a biochemistry major, but I got to the point where I couldn't walk in to the science center physically. I could not get myself out of bed. If I did manage to get out of bed and walk down the hill from my dorm, I'd look at the building and I'd turn around and I'd go back to bed and say, I'll give it a shot tomorrow. And it got to the point where I wasn't going to graduate because I could not finish my thesis. And I took a class on the anthropology of law and justice, and I took another class on criminal justice because they would give me the credits I would need to graduate on time. And they were just incredibly interesting classes. And in the late 80s,
Where I went to college, it was either you went into investment banking or you went to law school. So I decided to go to law school. And what happened then is I got so manic that I was actually civilly committed to a psychiatric hospital my first year of law school. Put out of school, put in an ambulance, driven to the hospital. Filed my own papers so that I could try to get released, had a commitment hearing, and was committed for up to 6 months. So in terms of recovery, at that point, I thought everything's over because everything I had ever known was taken away from me.
Right, right. What happened? So what happened after that? After you were committed for 6 months, did you go? You went back to obviously you went back to school. I mean, that's an amazing thing to be.
Thank you.
You could have lost your confidence in yourself, and it must have been an incredible amount of strength for you to decide to go back and complete your law degree.
I think it was, but I was not the only student from my school who was in the hospital at the time I was. And a very good friend of mine also went back to the law school the following year. She ended up not being able to make it through, and unfortunately there was a point at which she committed suicide, and she's no longer with us. But when I was there were at least 2 other students from the law school. So a lot of people say, was it Harvard that made you sick? And I'm like, hard saying not knowing, but there were quite a few of us who were there. The thing that really helped me the most in that hospitalization was the fact that there was a peer support group that met on campus of the hospital. So from that very first hospitalization, I was incredibly lucky because I saw other people who had the same diagnosis I did, who were out living lives in the community. So I had a reason to hope. I had a reason to think things would get better. If that wasn't there, and that was not my experience that first time I was in the hospital, I don't know that I would have come back.
So you kind of had role models or people that you could relate to that gave you the courage and strength to keep going and not give up.
Absolutely. And that was critical to my being able to head back to school the following year. And like I said, it just never occurred to me to not be open, probably because I was fairly oblivious to consequences on a certain level. And I was lucky that I didn't have a lot of the really negative repercussions to disclosing that I know friends of mine have had, because, we've talked about this for years, but how many of us really can put something like Council of Former Patients, McLean Hospital, on their resume and still get a job? I did. So I definitely recognize that I have been incredibly lucky. I mean, I actually got my first internship at Connecticut Legal Rights Project after my first year of law school because I disclosed in an interview with another legal aid agency in Connecticut. And the person who interviewed me said, we'd take you, but I think you'd like working for these other folks better. And that's what happened. And 23 years later, I'm in charge of the organizations. Doesn't get any better than that.
Right, right. So before that, you were working at statewide legal services,
Yes.
right? So did you feel that you weren't using the best of your abilities doing that? Or
I wouldn't say that at all, because that job was a critical part of my recovery. You may or may not remember this, but I was at statewide and left to go to another legal aid agency. And that, for whatever reason, I could not maintain my mental health at that other job. I loved the job. I loved the work I did. I loved the people I worked with. But I ended up in the hospital 5 times in a year and a half. And my husband and I were just married. He's awesome. He's still with me, 17 years later. But that was really the first year and a half, first 2 years of our marriage were absolutely horrible. I don't know. That's why I'm incredibly lucky that he stayed around. I, tried committing suicide several times, and that's why I ended up in the hospital. And I don't know. I really, to this day, don't really know what it was. But one of the key things that happened was my old boss at statewide, Norm Janes, had a shortage of staff because other people were out on various leaves. And he took me back temporarily when I was just not doing well at the other job. And I came back part-time, and I had days where I'd go to work, and 15 minutes into the day, I'd say, I have to leave. I can't do this today.
Wow.
Try again the next day. And then eventually they had enough funding, they were able to take me back on permanently, and I stayed for another 13 years. But the scary thing became at that point is, can I stay well at another job? Because when I've tried doing it, it didn't work out so well. But the timing was right, and when I was asked to come on to Connecticut Legal Rights Project a little over a year ago as the Associate Executive Director, I said, okay, I will do this.
You were ready for it
I
by
was
that
ready for
point.
it, exactly.
So, you know, it sounds like you're a real fighter and you're very persistent too.
Yes.
You don't give up.
No. And I think that's, if you were going to talk to me about my running, I think that's where that would come in.
Yeah, well, I
because-
want to ask you about that too. But going back for a minute, you said a lot about your first experiences. So, what are some of the challenges to your recovery? What are some of the things that you do to cope with things when having a hard day? Like, what are the...
Take a nap. It's two
love
things.
that.
It's either take a nap or exercise. When I'm doing really well, I exercise. When I'm not doing as well, I take a nap. You know, for a long period of time, medication was part of the solution for me. I had side effects just like all of us do, the weight gain, the lethargy, all kinds of stuff. I got to the point now where I don't take medication. It took me a long time to feel comfortable even making that choice to go without medication, because when I had tried going off of it in the past, it hadn't worked out all that well. But I've not gone glass, maintained my recovery, and it's going on close to 2 years now, I think, really, without taking any psychiatric medication. But there were periods of time where that worked. There were things that the medication did.
Do you feel that if something happens again, you would go back to it or you wouldn't go back to it?
I would like to not.
You'd
Or
use other
if
coping?
I'd use other coping skills, or if I needed it, I'd want it to be for a very short period of time. For me, you know, I was always told, my parents were always told, you have to be on this stuff for the rest of your life. It's just like diabetes, you know, insulin for diabetes, except for the fact that when you take insulin, you don't get discriminated against. And I just don't, for me personally, I don't believe it anymore. But if other people use that as a tool in their toolbox, I completely respect their choice to do that. But for me, I'd rather try to eat better, try to sleep more, try to keep my stress level down, which I can only do so much, especially given the job that I have now. There are too many external forces that have the ability to wreak havoc on my life, the life of my employees, the life of our clients. But recognizing the things that I can't control and just saying, I can do what I can do
Right.
to handle them, but other things are still above my pay grade.
So you-
Unfortunately, there's more within my pay grade now and more things that I have to deal with, but I'm learning how to deal with those.
And you're aware of your limitations too. Like when you start to feel overly stressed out, you find ways, like you said, by either taking a nap if you can, or running and doing that. And how about, tell me about your supports too, before we get onto the running, because I know it's very, very important. You know, first of all, I've talked to a lot of people who've gone off their medications, who have mental health issues, and I do believe also that it's works for some and doesn't work for others. But supports are really, really important. I know that for me, my husband is very supportive of me, and sometimes he sees my limits more than I do because I tend to want to do a million things.
I think we are both very lucky because we both have amazing husbands who put up with a lot. We put up with stuff too, but I think we are both incredibly blessed to have the spouses that we have in our lives. I know for me, when I used to do presentations for NAMI, I used to call him my best coping mechanism, and without a doubt, he is. But he's an amazing person, a talented graphic designer, but he's funny and he makes me laugh. And that's when I need that, he will just do something. You know, our dogs are, and cat that we've had who passed away, but our dogs are an enormous sense of relief just to have them there at the end of the day.
I know
and
what that's
go
like.
home.
We have a dog
Yeah.
too, so I just love her so much.
And, you know, it's the work, it's the coworkers, it's getting to do something I believe in every day with people who agree as much as I do in the importance of the rights of our clients, my friends and family. And again, I know for me, I'm incredibly lucky. I really have never lost folks once I got ill. There are a
that's
lot of people
wonderful.
I know who have. But the friends who stood by me through all of this 25 years of stuff really means a lot.
Right.
So-
That really is a blessing to be able to keep the people in your life, and you know, just to be able to know that they're still there, you know, to support you, and I just know that, like, for me, my friends and my husband and my in-laws, my sister-in-law in particular, are very, very supportive and loving. But my own family, you know, and sometimes I just think to myself, they're just, they have their own issues,
Right.
too.
And that is hard because for me too, my mom, my dad, were always incredibly supportive. My mom still is. My dad has passed away. That's why I said past tense for that. Mom, I love you. You know, and my brother, it was interesting because my brother, who died several years ago at 33, he actually, even though he never did real well with my illness because he just never dealt well with anybody who was sick, he really saved my life because him dying made me realize that all the stuff I was doing in terms of trying to take myself off the planet had to stop. And it
Right.
just really took, and he died of a heart attack, but we didn't expect that.
Right.
You know, my parents at one
33.
point told me we thought we would lose you, didn't expect to lose him. And that really was the biggest wake-up call you could ever get, because when you see what it's like for a parent to lose a child, I was like, I can't do that to them again because it's only the two of us.
Right.
So it finally said, okay, no matter what, that permanent solution to the temporary problem is no longer on the table as an option. I have to figure out a way to get through whatever life throws at me.
So you learned.
I learned.
from seeing your brother pass away at 33 that you didn't want to put your parents through the same thing.
I could never do that. I mean, and I couldn't do that to my husband, but really until that day, it didn't matter. And that's why when people do lose folks to suicide, and you know, you sometimes will hear, well, isn't that selfish? When you're in that bad space, you just don't see what you're doing to other people. It's not that you don't care about other people, but it doesn't enter into the equation.
It's so painful.
And it is, because
It's
you're like in a
extremely-
bad space. And
Right.
fortunately, luckily, I have not been in that bad space for a really long time.
That's great. Well,
And-
I want to. Oh, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, one of the things that has kept me out of that bad space is running. I mean,
And I want to hear a little bit about
Yeah.
that because I see you on Facebook and in your running
Yeah.
races. And
And-
how did you get involved with that?
It was something I always kind of did, but just a little bit. But what really has gotten me into it now is a group called Run 169 Town Society. And we are a group of people who have made it our mission to run a race in every town in Connecticut.
Oh, wow.
And right now I'm at about 60 towns, so I'm a little over a third of the way there. And it's just really friendly people. All we have to do is show up and run. And the people who are really fast, because there are people in our group who win the races, stay around and cheer for those of us in the back of the pack, like me, who comes in. As long as I'm not last, I'm happy.
Yeah.
So
even if you are,
and
as
even
long
if
as you finish.
as long as I finish, I've lapped everybody on the couch, and
Yeah.
but that's been a huge part of my recovery, and it's given me a whole new circle of friends.
And it's
who
so
I wouldn't have met
healthy.
otherwise, which is a good thing too.
Right, and
So
it's so good for you too, to physically, to exercise and do that.
and see everything that Connecticut has to offer, because there are towns that I've gone to already that I have never been in and probably would never have been in, but for the fact that I have to run a race there.
Oh, that's neat.
So
you
it's-
want to
it's
go to
kinda neat.
every town in
Every town in
Connecticut,
yeah.
and run in a running race? And how many have you been to again?
About 60.
Wow.
So
Wow,
Yeah.
that's great. Well, we only have a few minutes, like maybe 1 or 2 minutes left. But I just wanted to ask you finally, because this is what I ask people at the end. What would you say to people who are watching and still struggling with mental health issues or substance use issues in about 30 seconds?
never, 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 never quit. There is hope. It does get better. And that's what people need to remember.
Great. Thank you, Kathy.
You're welcome. This was fun.
Yeah. So we're gonna have a show next month in December, and we're pretty much booked up through April. I have guests on for the next few months, but if you're interested in being on the show, you can contact me at vmolta@aol.com, and it's just a wonderful opportunity to be able to share your own experiences and to fight stigma. So I just want to thank Jeff Hansen for the camera. I want to thank Amy Abigail White who runs the studio. I want to thank Kathy, and I just want to thank the audience for watching tonight, and so we'll see you next month. Thanks.
Thanks.
Now we have to